Welcome back. Well, the White House issuing a warning to Israel after an airstrike in Rafah killed 2 senior Hamas leaders as well as dozens of civilians over the weekend. A spokesman for the U.S. National Security Council says this, quote, Israel has a right to go after Hamas, but as we've been clear, Israel must take every precaution possible to protect civilians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the incident a, quote, tragic mistake. Israeli and Egyptian officials also holding urgent talks yesterday after Egyptian service members and Israeli Defense Forces exchanged gunfire at the Rafah border crossing, leaving 1 Egyptian officer dead. Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Your reaction to the Rafah incident?
Well, the 2 incidents certainly are significant. One, obviously, the tragic death of the 45 civilians and those casualties may grow. So our audience understands Israel is targeting 2 Hamas leaders who lead activities in the West Bank, interesting enough. And obviously, this is a hideout for them. And they targeted those 2 leaders. And right next to that target were displaced civilians living in temporary shelters or tents. And we've all seen photos of what that's like. They're literally living on top of one another. And as a result of the strike, a fire broke out and it spread very rapidly through that temporary tent city. Obviously, I don't think Netanyahu or his administration needs any warnings from the United States.
Exactly.
I mean, frankly, they believe this is a tragic incident, and they've admitted that, and they're trying to get to the bottom of, you know, why this took place, who authorized the target, how much information did they know about the temporary city that was right next to the target, and how do they prevent something like this from happening again. This is what a democracy does, who is operating with strong values to protect its own people and to protect, obviously, civilians on a battlefield as much as possible. Admit that a mistake has been made and try to figure out how to prevent it from happening again, and that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, General, I'm really glad you said that, because that was my instinct immediately when I read this story. I mean, the fog of war is ugly, but it is a reality. And, you know, to hear the White House say something like, oh, you know, they're allowed to go into Rafah, but they have to do everything they can to protect civilians. I mean, no kidding. Did President Biden know that when he did his botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we lost 13 servicemen? And all of a sudden, it's all about Israel making these mistakes. Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Biden administration is, quote, pressing European allies to back off plans to rebuke Iran because of the advances that Iran has made in its nuclear program, even as it expands its stockpile of near-weapons-grade fissile material to a record level. I mean, General, I don't understand what's going on here. A U.S. official denying this claim, telling the Wall Street Journal that Washington is, quote, tightly coordinated with Europe ahead of the IAEA board meeting next month, and that, quote, any speculation about decisions is premature. But why are we hearing this anyway, that the U.S. would be stopping European allies from confronting Iran on what it's doing in its nuclear program?
Yeah, well, what's happened here, certainly after Iranians' massive airstrike against Israel, which obviously we recorded very well here, and the U.S.-led coalition that helped Israel to stop that strike from being successful, the G7, the United States and European like-minded democracies have come together. And they want to impose sanctions on Iran as a result of that strike, which in their minds is unprovoked. And certainly that's a step in the right direction. We know full well that Iran is selling its oil to China, and it's got it flush with money, despite enormous inflation problems and currency value problems they have inside their country. There is a possibility that we can get Iran back on its heels where it was in the previous administration. And we've been saying for some time Biden should change the strategy as opposed to trying to appease the Iranians and make this nuclear deal. It staggers me that almost 4 years into this administration, we're still trying to make something of a diplomatic effort with the Iranians, where obviously they have thrown diplomacy aside, and they're about one thing and one thing only. That's aggression, drive the United States out of the region, destroy the state of Israel. They've operationalized all of their proxies to do it. Wake up and see it for what it really is here.
Yeah.
There is no diplomacy effort that's going to succeed with the Iranians. And now we got the Europeans have awoken to this reality themselves, and they want to press forward, something we believe they should have done a long time ago. But they're here. And now the Biden administration is trying to tamp that down in the hope that some possibility an opening would take place. There have been clandestine meetings with the Iranians by members of the administration that have been going on at least a few weeks ago. I don't know if they're still continuing to this day, but that sends a huge signal to what is really happening here. Here we have Iran seeking domination and control of the Middle East. It's obviously have inflamed its proxies to put as much pressure on Israel, and that is an existential threat in an attempt to destroy the state of Israel and reduce the Israelis' willingness to live in a country that's so volatile because of the security situation. That's what this is all about. And see it for what it is.
Well, over and over again, it feels like this administration protects the bad guys. I mean, look, let's just say what it is that we see. I mean, Iran has been threatening the United States, threatening our service members on the ground, obviously, behind all of the attacks on Israel. And yet Europe is not allowed to get involved and say something about the nuclear program to try to pull them back in. Why? Why are we constantly protecting the bad guys, whether it's Iran, China, Russia, or anybody else?
Well, what's happening here is the Biden administration strategically had made up its mind when they took over from Trump, all things Trump were bad.
Right.
Despite the fact that Iran was back on its heels because of the sanctions, despite the fact that progress had been made in the Abraham Accords, as opposed to riding on the heels of that and making sure that all the sanctions were enforced, because you've got to watch sanctions every month and every week and every day because there's always slippage taking place.
Sure.
Button them down and make sure they're working properly should have been the policy, and continue to strengthen the Abraham Accords. No, wipe the slate clean, started over, and open negotiations. And now the Middle East is on fire, just like Europe is on fire because Russia saw weakness in the United States, particularly after Afghanistan. They're inside Ukraine.
Yep.
And Iran saw weakness in the United States, an appeasement strategy. Oh, that's what we did before in the Obama-Biden administration in the past. We got their number. We understand this. We're going to take advantage of this. There's opportunity here. There's vulnerability on the part of the United States, and we're going to get more aggressive. And that is exactly what we're saying. And here, even now, after the Middle East is on fire, the Biden administration cannot still see the reality of what is taking place strategically by Iran.
Unbelievable.
It's stunning to me that they won't change their policy.
It is stunning, and yet everybody else sees it, just the way we see very clearly what's happening as a result of this wide-open border. We still don't know why thousands and tens of thousands of Chinese nationals are coming into the country via the open border, 30,000 just since October in California alone. And then there's Taiwan, a bipartisan congressional delegation meeting with Taiwan's President Lai yesterday, just days after China launched military drills around Taiwan in protest of Lai's inauguration. The delegation, led by House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul, vowing to support Taiwan, promising the U.S. was moving forward with weapons deliveries for Taiwan. General, your reaction to this?
Yeah, well, I spoke to Chairman McCaul just before he left, and he told me his purpose in leading this bipartisan delegation was to make certain that the new administration under President Lai, who obviously intends to continue much of the policies of the previous administration, President Tsai, where he was the vice president, but Chairman McCaul wants President Lai to understand fully that the House of Representatives and the committee that he leads in bipartisan support is behind his administration and is going to do two things for them. Number one, see that they can get them all the arms and munitions they need, and also encourage the Department of Defense to increase the training of the Taiwan military. And they want them to know that they have their support, and that's why he's there so early in this administration, just a matter of a week old. I think that's a great move by Chairman McCaul in doing this, and it sends a large signal. There's two entities in our government that deal with foreign policy and national security. Obviously, one is the leader, the executive branch, but the other is the Congress of the United States, and they're doing their duty here.
All right. We will leave it there. General, good to see you as always. Thank you, sir.